Hello, welcome to our May 2025 office hours. This month, we're going to be going over literary resources on financial topics. So, we're just going to cover a couple books that I've read and I'll break them down and we'll go through them. But before we do that, a couple jokes as an icebreaker. Hopefully, you like them. Here we go. Why was the math book sad? Why was the math book sad? He had too many problems. And why are books always afraid of their sequels? They always come after them. This is a good one. What made the librarian fall? She walks through the non-friction section. Okay. This is our agenda this month. First, we're just going to start with a big idea. What is reading, right? What is it? Why do we do it? Have a conversation about why read at all. We're going to go over Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Your Money or Your Life, The Art of Frugal Hedonism, and some honorable mentions, Warren Buffett and the interpretation of financial statements, The Wealth of Nations, and The Firm, the Market, and the Law. So those first three, we're going to break down a lot more than the last three. The last three are just good books that I think anyone interested in money, economics, or personal finance should have on their radar. So what is reading? Why does it matter? Written language has been around for a very long time. We've been recording our thoughts in one way or another, from carving into stone to clay tablets, and then the written language, paper, printing press. It's very important, right? And the reason it was to share information with people, to get it out there so that more people could have access to it. Ideas could spread faster using this new mode of communication. So when I think of reading and why I like to read is because I'm basically lazy. I don't have time to think all the grand thoughts that all of these authors have had. They have lived long and interesting lives. They've studied things that I'll never study. They've experienced things that I'll never experience. And you can't, right? You're limited by your own lifespan, your own environment. And so by reading, you can take away their learnings from their experiences, condensed and then downloaded into your mind. Of course, always with a critical lens and a grain of salt, depending on the author, right? Keep their background in mind as well. So, first example, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read this book back in 2017. That was when I was in biotech. I was a scientist, but I was still interested in money, and I had heard things about this book, pretty popular book. Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lecher. Yeah, it's a good one. All of these books are good books that I recommend anyone pick up and try out. So the major takeaways in this book, focusing on assets and not liabilities. So this was a shift in thinking for me, where he defines assets as things that put money into your pocket, and he defines liabilities as things that take money out of your pocket. This is a little bit different than the traditional finance view of assets and liabilities, where he would say if you own a house and you're not renting, that house isn't putting money into your pocket, it's not actually an asset, it's a liability. Whereas a bank or other financial institution would look at it and consider it an asset. Make money work for you. So the whole book centers around him and his experience of having his father, his poor dad, and his friend's father, his rich dad, right? And he noticed the differences between how they operated, how they interacted with money, the world around them. So his poor dad never made money work for him. He was always working to get the money, but his rich dad used the money to make more money. And so that's making money work for you. Financial education is crucial, right? He points out that the traditional education system doesn't teach financial literacy. It leaves a lot wanted. And so it's up to the individuals to educate themselves whenever possible. Number 4 here, pay yourself first. This is the idea that it doesn't matter how much money you make if you're not saving or investing it, if it's all just leaving, it's all going to some expense, then you're never going to build wealth that way. And so by paying yourself first, putting into a savings or investment account, it's critical. Overcoming fear, taking calculated risks. So he is big into real estate, Kiyosaki. So when he talks about real estate, I listen quite a bit, and he takes calculated risks on the properties that he buys. He can't guarantee that there's a profit. No one can guarantee a profit in any risk, but we all perceive risk to be more than what it is. And so overcoming that fear and taking those calculated risks can really lead to outsized rewards. Mindset matters. So having the mindset of it's okay to fail. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time. I'm going to learn from it rather than I don't want, a failure would be ruinous, right? A failure would mean I all those negative thoughts that I have, they're true, right? And so having the mindset of it's okay to fail and that we learn and we grow, and then applying that to business, right? Building multiple streams of income. So understanding that any one stream of income has its own volatilities, and that having multiple streams of income will even out the different volatile natures of each source of income and provide a much more stable income stream. And escaping the rat race, right? I go to work to make money, to spend on things that make my life easier, or into credit card debt. And then I have to go back to work, and you're just in this cycle of working and spending, and there doesn't seem really to be an end of it. But he says that getting to the point where you can exit the rat race and live on these multiple income streams is the ultimate goal. So this chart breaks down what I've just reviewed a little bit more concisely. First, like I mentioned, he throughout the book is referencing his poor dad and his rich dad and the different ways that they went about it. So as far as like work, for the rich dad, money worked for the rich dad. The poor dad worked for the money. The rich dad focused on acquiring assets, and the poor dad acquired liabilities, but he thought that they were assets. Financial education, the rich dad prioritized financial literacy, and the poor dad relied on traditional education, leaving some gaps especially around financial literacy. Risk. So the rich dad embraced calculated risks and failed, but those failures just made him better, right? And the next time he was able to get the reward from the risk that he was taking. And the poor dad avoided risks and saw them as things to be feared and avoided. So the rich dad built multiple income streams. The poor dad depended on a salary, right? We talked about how that makes a much more volatile income stream. And the mindset, the rich dad asks, how can I afford it? How can I grow myself to make the life that I want? And the poor dad says, I can't afford it, and doesn't grow to it, right? Doesn't grow himself in order to get there. He just says, no, I can't afford it and it can't be done, right? Spending. So the rich dad pays himself first, invests, saves, and then spends the remainder. The poor dad spends first and then invests the remainder, right? So just the flip-flop there. Multiple streams of income. So this is a chart from the book. I love a 4-quadrant graph like this. So we have active and passive forms of income, and then we have these percentages of who is doing these different forms of income. So 95% of people stay in this active column here. They're either employees working for an employer on a W-2, collecting a paycheck. It's active. They're there every day. They're always thinking about it, and they're getting their paycheck. Or they're self-employed, like myself, right? I'm working for myself. I'm working for myself all the time. It's active, right? This is different than the passive column, being a business owner, meaning different from what I'm doing as a solopreneur, Being a business owner would be the business is able to operate even when the boss isn't around. So if you were, say, setting up a warehouse, eventually you could turn that warehouse over to a warehouse manager or a fast food chain, right? Eventually, you as the owner wouldn't have to be there and you could turn that over to a manager and they could operate it, provide you profits even when you're not there, right? Passively. And then investor, right? Investment income could be stocks, could be bonds, could be rental income. But the point is passive. And then through these multiple streams of income, reducing total volatility in the income stream. And then the idea of assets versus liabilities. So you start with your job, and then you can spend that income either on assets or on liabilities. And from this graph, you can see you spend on assets, the assets put money right back into income. Whereas a liability, you buy it and then you just have to keep spending on it. Either it's a one-time purchase or like a car, you have to insure it, pay taxes on it, gas, maintenance, liability. A house is a similar example. And then also you can see what happens if you lose your job and your income stops, right? Eventually, your assets are able to produce that income, and that is getting out of the rat race, as it were. So, some notable quotes from the book: it's not how much money you make, but how much money you keep. There's a difference between being poor and being broke. Broke is temporary and poor is eternal, speaking to the state of mind. You must understand the difference between an asset and a liability and buy assets. So understanding that even what the traditional education and finance system calls an asset might not be an asset as in cash producing, cash flowing asset. And that's really what you want to buy. Winners are not afraid of losing, but losers are. Failure is part of the process of success. And this is another mindset. This book is all about changing your mindset, not being afraid of losing or overcoming fear so that you can take those calculated risks that lead to outsized rewards and produce assets that can get you out of the rat race. Next up, your money or your life. This is a really good one. There's some ideas that I'm still mulling over, and actually I've taken a few of these, added them into my practice, and I'm able to bring it to my clients as well. So, major takeaways from this book. This book tries to shift the paradigm and how you think of money. And that's like the one big thing is like a shift from money as like a means of exchange to money as your life energy. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? You go to work, they pay you money, you just exchange your life energy for that money, right? And it's the same when you purchase things. You're then taking that money, which represents all that time and energy you put in to earn it, and then spending it. Thinking of it as life energy is just a different way to think of that. The fulfillment curve. So this is the idea of enough. What is enough? When have I had enough? Imagine you have nothing. You need to survive. You need to become comfortable. You need to have some luxuries, right? There comes a point or right around there when spending starts to become wasteful and it adds clutter to your life and it becomes more stressful. So just understanding that there's a point where there is enough and that any more doesn't add to your life and actually can draw from it. They have a 9-step program for financial independence. It's an interesting 9 steps. We'll go through it. This book and these ideas were originally published in the 1980s. A different time doesn't make the ideas any less valid today. You have to put them in context of when they were written. So we'll go through that in the next slide. And then they talk about a wall chart. A wall chart is something you put up next to your desk or wherever you spend your day. And so you see it all the time and you track your progress towards financial independence. So income, expenses, and then investment income, passive investment income, right? Just like Kiyosaki was talking about, having that passive income allows you to escape the rat race. And this book is also advocating escaping the rat race, just not in those terms. So here is the 9-step program outlined in Your Money or Your Life. First step, making peace with the past, understanding your net worth now, and reflecting on your financial history. It's not here, but in the book, they said, send a letter to, this is the 1980s, so send a letter. But you could probably get it another way today. But the Social Security Administration has records of all the money that you've ever earned in your life. And so if you just request that information from them, you can then accurately look back and see, oh my God, all of this money has entered my life. Where is it now? Some of it will be reflected in your net worth, but for most people, it's just a very small portion of the total amount of money that has ever entered their life. So next, tracking your life energy. They introduced this concept of a real hourly wage. And I've talked about it before a little bit, but essentially you adjust your hourly wage to include factors like the time and the expense of commuting, or the time and expense of getting ready in the morning, makeup or hair products, or if you have work-related clothing that you buy. All of these would adjust the wage that your employer's paying you to reflect your real hourly wage. So this allows you to compare jobs that might seem the same, and then you can compare them on a real hourly wage basis to understand which will actually improve your bottom line the most. For example, 2 jobs are exactly the same, but one is remote. So you don't have the expense of commuting. You don't have the expense both in time and money. Maybe you get ready in the morning and you're able to eat lunch at home, right? So those savings will accrue over time, and your real hourly wage in the remote job will be higher than your real hourly wage in the job which is not remote. Number 3, tracking every penny. So recording all income and expenses. This is something I advocate very strongly for. Gotta become aware of our spending, right? It's so easy just walking down the street to pick up a coffee and a sandwich and not really think of it. Hey, you're in the expensive part of town. And that was just $15, right? And if we think of money as our life energy, we have to consciously be making those choices. Asking 3 key questions for each expense. Did I get fulfillment from the life energy spent? Did it align with my values? And would I spend this if I didn't have to work for money? So would I spend this if I didn't have to work for money is a different thing. If you have any, let's say, rituals that you use to de-stress, or if you really earn that vacation because you worked for your money, right? Those would be expenses that don't align with this. Because if you didn't have to work for money, you wouldn't be stressed. You wouldn't feel like you really needed a vacation, perhaps. You wouldn't feel like you needed to drink to feel relaxed at the end of the day. Number 5, creating that wall chart. So this is the visual tracking of income, expenses, and then passive income as well. Number 6 is reducing spending. This dovetails with the wall chart because you're tracking expenses and you're also tracking your income and your passive income to reach this next point, which is the crossover point. And this crossover point is when your investment income, passive investment income, covers your expenses. And this point is a lot easier to reach with reduced spending and increased income. Number 9 is investing for financial independence, choosing safe and reliable investments to generate passive income. So I mentioned this book was written in the 80s, and in the 80s, you could buy 30-year bonds with, don't quote me on this, but you can get like 10%, right, on a 30-year bond. So a bond was like a really valid, safe place to store money and then generate that passive income. Picture's changed a little bit today, but the concept is still true. Whereas if your investments are generating passive income that can cover all of your expenses, you've reached that crossover point. And so, checks out. Just the stability of the bonds. It might not be bonds, right? So the safe and reliable aspect might be a little bit different today. So here's the fulfillment curve. So we're broke, right? We're not very fulfilled. Okay. The life's hard when you're broke. Get a little bit of money, you start buying your own food, buying your own apartment, buying your own shoes, right? These are things you need. And then you just continue, right? You get a little bit more money. Well, suddenly you can afford a TV, maybe get a pet. Maybe a pet's a luxury actually, but comfort. So you start buying things to make you feel comfortable, right? Just make your life easier. Niceties, right? Not necessities, niceties. And then beyond that, luxuries. This would be luxury goods. You can think of watches and expensive hats and a bunch of things, but you get the idea. And then at some point in there, there's enough, right? There's enough. Your life is full. You have nice things. You're comfortable, right? And if you keep buying, if you keep spending your money on things, physical, tangible things, it starts to become a little cluttered. You start having things all around you. So you can't set anything down because all the surfaces are covered. And then it just becomes complicated. Like you have all these things and they need their own different sorts of maintenance. Maybe you have leather jackets and leather shoes, and these things need yearly cleaning to maintain their appearance. And then beyond that, things just become a hassle. Think of hoarders, right? You can barely walk around in your house, right? And now that's an extreme example, but this just happens gradually over time. And the point is to avoid overconsumption, but to have a really fulfilled life at the same time. This is an example of the wall chart. So you can imagine if it was broken down on the x-axis here, each period, whatever it might be, weekly, monthly, you would just put a dot. Okay, what was my income? What was my expense? And then how much am I earning from my investments, right? And you just put those dots in weekly, monthly, and eventually you'd have lines. Or you could put trends. You could start to see the trends, and that's what it's about, is keeping this top of mind. Because once you reach that crossover point, it's financial independence. And that's huge. It means you don't have to work for money anymore. You can go work, right? You can go work for your employer, but the stakes are a little different, right? You're freer at work, right? Maybe you feel more free to pursue more risky projects at work, make your voice heard a little bit more, whatever it may be. Just one notable quote I liked from this one. There is a way to live an authentic, productive, meaningful life and have all the material comforts you want or need. There's a way to balance your inner and outer lives, to have your job self be on good terms with your family self and your deeper self. I think this quote really encapsulates a lot of the ideas in the book. It's all about balance and how you go about your life, being productive and authentic and meaningful, having a full life, comfortable life, and doing it in a way that for example, your family self doesn't hate your job self because you're always at work. And your job self doesn't hate your family self because you're being taken away from your job. I don't know. But the point is living in harmony with yourself and the life that you want to live. So the last book that we're going to do a deep dive in here is The Art of Frugal Hedonism by Adam Grubb and Annie Rasser Rowland. Major takeaways from this book. So let's break down the title first. The Art of Frugal Hedonism. Okay. So frugal hedonism. Hedonism. Hedonism is pleasure. Okay. And then being frugal with your money, right? So not spending a lot of it while also seeking pleasure. It's an art. It's not a science. It's different for everyone, but from the experience of these authors, we can learn a lot about how they lived full, enjoyable lives while also not spending their hard earned money. First takeaway here, creating your own normal. By living a frugal, hedonic lifestyle, you're going to look a little different than the average person in society. And you'll have your own standards of what enough means. I think that these authors would be maybe much less open to buying luxuries, being frugal, right? In a frugal budget, there's really no space for luxuries. But, and that's what they mean by creating your own normal, is their normal wouldn't include luxuries. Whereas Vicki Robbins, Your Money, Your Life, it likely includes luxuries, right? So just deciding what that means for you and not just following society's expectations of what our normal should be. So relishing and being mindful of enjoyment. This is a different sort of mind shift where they advocate savoring experiences and really focusing on the quality of the experience. So if you've ever had a really good piece of fruit, just thinking about that piece of fruit over and over and like slowing down when you eat it and really lengthening the experience of eating it rather than eating one and then like quickly going to get the other and like you run out, right? So just a different way of enjoying life. Being materialistic, not in the way most people talk about it. So instead of owning a lot of different things, owning a small number of quality items that you really care for rather than being materialistic and going out and getting the newest iPhone, caring for the things you already have rather than going out and getting the next big thing. Freedom through multiple interests. So having a bunch of hobbies that you deeply enjoy that also don't require much money. You can spend money on almost anything, right? So like myself, huge fan of gardening. Seeds are very cheap. I have a small, like a seed sprouting station, and I've had these things for years, right? These authors would probably advocate buying these things secondhand. So having these interests, maybe hiking or running or activities, you buy a used tennis racket and suddenly tennis is very cheap. But having these multiple interests that don't require money and really make for a joyful life. Next, hate waste. So this one is an interesting one, and people, I think, would follow it to greater and lesser extents. Just maximizing the value from everything around you and the satisfaction from your resources that you've already spent. This could be like you have an old t-shirt, right? And instead of just tossing it out, you cut it up and you make rags out of it, right? Yeah, anytime you go to throw something out, ask yourself, can this be repurposed? Does it have any value left in it? What can I do with this? And then also they advocate for shopping within the waste stream. So this is secondhand items. It's also dumpster diving. I've never done that myself. Interested in it? Maybe, someone out there, just send me an invite. It might be fun. Recalibrating your senses, number 6 here. We live in a very stimulating world all around us. So by reducing that stimulation, we can enjoy the simple stimulation that might otherwise be lost in the sea of bright lights and sounds and colors all around us. Related is the power of contrast. So like a feast-famine cycle, or if you're familiar, there's a theory called hedonic set point theory. Fits in with frugal hedonism. Hedonic set point theory has to do with pleasure and pain. Ice baths are really popular nowadays. And an ice bath is a painful experience. There's no way around it. It's just a painful experience. But people enjoy it because once you're through that painful experience, it only lasts a couple minutes. You're able to much more appreciate the joyful things in life, such as warmth, that you might not have been appreciating before. Here are my favorite actionable tips from this one. And there are lots of it. I encourage anyone to read this. Home cooked meals over restaurant dining, right? This is like slam dunk. It's always a win, right? If you can spend more on your grocery bill than on eating out, that's always a win. And when you do go out, just don't order a drink. This has really been an unlock for me. Water's always in style and it's healthy. Drinks with meals, often alcoholic, often empty calories, often they don't add any nutrition to the meal, and they're expensive, unnecessarily expensive. So if you're like, oh, Tom, but I love going out to restaurants. Okay, do it. But my challenge would be skip the drink. Just give it a try. Number two, walks with friends instead of expensive outings. So often we will default to going to the bar or going to the restaurant to catch up with people. And we don't need to do these things. It's just like a default. And if we think of it, we don't want to really be there. We want to just be with our friend and catch up with them. And a good way to do that is to create new memories in a new place and not just like a noisy backdrop. That also happens to be expensive. Number three, decluttering and caring for what you already have. Decluttering as an exercise, maybe annually you go through and you say, I haven't touched this in half a year, and I don't think I'm going to touch it in the future. I don't need it anymore. I can put on a buy nothing Facebook group or repurpose it in a bunch of different ways. Number four, DIY repairs and upcycling. If something breaks, try to fix it yourself. I had the subwoofer on my speakers go out. Instead of buying another $100 subwoofer, I bought a $20 repair kit and gave it a try myself. Jury's out whether or not the fix actually worked, but it sounds better. It'll at least defer me needing to buy a new subwoofer. Time in nature for free enjoyment. Nature's amazing. It produces in me at least a sense of awe, which is really, really important for a rich life, I think. And then try shopping in the waste stream. Secondhand stores, buy nothing Facebook groups are really good. Just walking down the street the other day, I saw one of those wagons that you attach to a bike for a kid. Like a small kid, you like put them in there and they like just sit and you bike and tow them along. Yeah, I'm sure those aren't cheap and it was just there for free on the sidewalk. So an example of shopping in the waste stream. There are lots of things out there that are perfectly good that people just let go of. So some notable quotes from this book. With such an abundance of cheap things to replace broken cheap things, many of us have lost the most basic knowledge of how to care for them. And instead, we've almost fetishized the pleasure of not bothering. It really speaks to what consumerism has brought us to, and that things are cheap and they break easy, and that we don't really even bother with these things. And it's a lack of respect for the material world. The truly savvy hedonist avoids blunting her capacity for pleasure against a barrage of constant stimulation. So our world is full of stimulating things, right? Light, noise, color, it's everywhere. If you've ever gone camping, I love camping, especially if you don't have any internet service, super good. Cell service, get way out there and don't look at your phone screen, turn it off. The car ride back, if you just play music in the car ride back, that's always an amazing experience for me because you've gone those days without it. It's just so nice to hear that music almost for the first time. Indulging your curiosity is deep hedonism. As your understandings amass, you begin to sense the world around you as a dense and majestic cathedral of thrumming, interconnected functions and stories. So I love this. Humans are extremely curious, and by indulging this curiosity, it's a frugal way to really gain a more deep understanding of the world that we all live in. Like how I was talking about in the beginning, by reading these books, indulging curiosity, you're able to understand things about your world that you as an individual might never have experienced. And then you're able to see the world as a much more interconnected unit. An honorable mention, I have three of these. First one, Warren Buffett and the Interpretation of Financial Statements. Search for the company with a durable competitive advantage. It's by Mary Buffett and David Clark. Bear with me while I read this summary here for you. Warren Buffett and the Interpretation of Financial Statements distills Buffett's approach to analyzing financial statements, income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement to identify companies with a durable competitive advantage or moat that can sustain superior returns over time. The book provides practical guidelines and key financial metrics that Buffett uses to spot such businesses, focusing on consistent profitability, low debt, strong cash generation, and business models that foster long-term growth and resilience. So if you're interested in investing, specifically like stock picking and also value investing being Buffett's approach, give this book a read. It's pretty good. A little dry. You have to be aware financial statements are pretty dry, but this book does its best to be entertaining at the same time. Next up, The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. This is a classic, right? Written in the 1700s, late 1700s. Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations argues that a nation's prosperity is best achieved through division of labor, free markets, and individuals pursuing their own self-interest, guided by the invisible hand to promote societal benefit. The book critiques mercantilism and excessive government intervention, advocating instead for a limited government focused on defense, justice, and public works. I would also add in education there. And positioning that economic growth is driven by capital accumulation, competition, and open trade. So this book's pretty dry as well, but it's also so good. If you can get over the dryness and the archaic way that it's written, there's a lot of insights into this period in history where the mercantilism system, the balance of trades between countries was going out, and capitalism or commerce were coming into their strength. Final honorable mention is The Firm, the Market, and the Law by R.H. Coase. This is less a novel and more of a collection of papers written by R.H. Coase. He was in the Chicago School of Law. He was an economist and a really smart guy. He changed the way that economists think of transaction costs and external costs, externalities. One of his papers was called The Problem of Social Cost. R.H. Coase's The Firm, the Market, and the Law explores how firms arise to minimize transaction costs that make pure market exchanges inefficient, arguing that the boundaries of firms are determined by the comparative costs of organizing transactions internally versus using the market. The book also introduces the Coase theorem, asserting that with well-defined property rights and negligible transaction costs, private negotiations can resolve externalities efficiently without always requiring government intervention, thereby highlighting the critical role of legal frameworks in shaping economic outcomes. So if you've had some economics education and maybe you've read these other books, this would be like the final boss that you want to tackle. Pretty dense, very academic, but also you'll see the world differently, right? It answers the question, why doesn't Ford or Disney just do everything in the world? Why did they stop growing? So, interesting book. Just to summarize all this, reading is a core part of an enriched life. Through reading, you're exposed to ideas that you otherwise wouldn't be. I hope this presentation today brought you some ideas that you might not have otherwise been exposed to. But I certainly didn't have time to get into the details here. Pick up these books for yourself. Give them a read, give them a listen. I love listening to audiobooks. Libby is a great resource. It connects to the public library system, and you can download audiobooks right to your phone. Thank you for joining us this month. As always, I'm Thomas Anzivino. This has been another webinar, May 2025, and come on back next month.